So sorry for the delay. It kept crashing on me. I I had the worst time trying to get the darn thing running. Anyway, I'm trying to fix my lamp. I'm trying to change my setup a little bit, so everything's a little disheveled. But that's okay. Whatever, hey? We'll get this thing going here in a second. Like my hands have the above lights on because my lamp's shade's all broken. And so I'm going to work on getting that fixed. And it's not the tear. That tear is just down from where the where it was being held on to. And there. And I want to the whole thing kind of, this thing fell off, so I have some wire, so I just zip tied it down, and I was going to use said wire to fix it again, and maybe it'll work better in zip ties. And hot glue. So there's a lot of Dante's Inferno left, so I'm going to start off with the 17 to 26 here, and we'll listen to that while you watch me kind of fiddle with this and see if I can get this all working good. Now these are just kind of regular pliers, or snippers, not pliers. And I guess I need to do my bigger ones. I have them for everything. But yeah, like I said, the recording program crashed my computer when it came on. It does that sometimes with the multiple webcams, and both webcams are the same. So I had to reboot, and then I started up again, and it did it again. So I had to reboot again. And anyway, I'm running now, so yay. Where does my wire go? So this is my little bit of craft wire. It's well, it's not technically not. It's 18 gauge copper, but the intent was to do some welding with it and some stuff. But anyway, I'm going to start the stream here. It crashed. Okay. Clear it. I have to reload the audio book list again. It was cleared when the darn computer crashed, so 17, that's 51, I believe. 51 is 17, there it is. So I'll play that.
Section 51 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 17. Purgatory, the third ring. Anger. Instances of punished anger. The angel of peace. Love.
Reader, remind thyself if e'er a fog o'ertook thee on a mountain, one through which thou couldst not see in any other way than moles do through the membrane o'er their eyes. How, when the damp, thick mists begin to thin, the sun's orb feebly pierces them, and quickly with thine imagination come to see how I first saw the sun again, which now was at its setting. Thus, as I mine own was matching with my teacher's trusty steps, From such a cloud I came into the beams, already dead upon the shores below. O thou imagination, which at times dost steal us so from outer things, that though 1,000 trumpets blow, one hears them not, what moveth thee, if sense contribute naught? A light which takes in heaven its form impels thee, freely, or by a will which sends it down. The vision of her cruelty, who changed her form into the bird, which most delights in song, appeared in my imagination. And hereupon my mind was so shut up within itself, that nothing that was then received by it came to it from without. Then into my high fantasy there reigned one crucified, contemptuous and proud in aspect, and as such he met his death. Around him were the great Ahasuerus, Esther his wife, and righteous Mordecai, who so whole-hearted was in word and deed. And as this picture of its own accord broke up, as doth a bubble when it lacks the water it was formed withal, a maid rose in my vision next, who bitterly was weeping, and was saying,
Why, O Queen, didst thou through anger wish to be no more? Lavinia, not to lose, thyself hast slain, and now hast lost me. Mother, this is I, who, ere I mourn another's loss, mourn thine.
As sleep is broken, when unwonted light strikes closed eyes suddenly, and being broken quivers before it wholly dies away, even so did my imagining break up, as soon as on my face there smote a light brighter by far than we are wont to see. I turned around to notice where I was, when lo, a voice which said,
The ascent is here.
From every other interest turned my mind, and made my will so eager to behold the speaker that when such it never rests until it sees its object face to face. But as before the sun, which whelms our eyes and veils its figure through excess of light, so likewise here my visual powers failed.
A godlike spirit this, who, though unasked, is pointing out to us our upward path, and with his own light is himself concealing. With us he deals as one would with himself, for he that waits till asked, when seeing need, inclines already meanly to refuse. To such a bidding let us now accord our feet, and try to climb ere darkness come, for later one could not, till day returned.
Thus said my leader then, and I with him turned toward a flight of stairs our feet, and I, when on its first step, near me felt, as 'twere, the motion of a wing, and on my face a fanning, while a voice said,
Blessed are the peaceful, who are free from evil wrath.
So high above us now were those last beams which by the night are followed, that the stars were coming out on many sides. And, oh, my strength, why dost thou fade away so fast? I to myself was saying, for a truce I felt was set the powers of my legs. We now were where the flight of stairs went up no further, and as motionless we were as is a vessel when the shore is reached. And for a while I waited to find out if aught upon the new ring could be heard. Then toward my teacher turning round, I said, Say, my dear father, what offence is purged in this ring, here where now we are? Although our feet keep still, let not thy talking cease. And he to me,
The love of good, when scant of what it should have been, is here atoned. Here beats again the ill-retarded oar. But now, in order that thou understand more clearly still, turn thou thy mind to me, and some good fruit thou'lt gather from our stay. Neither Creator,
he began,
nor creature was e'er devoid of either innate love or that which conscious is, and this thou knowest. The innate love is always free from error, but the other kind can err through evil aim or through deficient or excessive strength. While well directed toward the primal goods and toward the secondary self-restraint, it cannot be the cause of sinful pleasure. But when it turns toward evil things, or runs to good with more or less zeal than it ought, the creature then against his Maker works. From this, then, thou canst understand that love must be the seed in you of every virtue, and every deed that merits punishment. And now, since love can never turn its face from its own subjects' welfare, from self-hate all are secure. And since one cannot think of any self as being from the first divided and existing of itself, All hearts are thus debarred from hating him. It follows that, if I in arguing judge well, one's neighbour's is the harm one loves, and this is borne in three ways in your clay. There's he who on the abasement of his neighbour his hope of rising sets, and only longs that from his greatness he may be brought low. And he who fears the loss of power, favour, renown, and honour, should another rise, and grieves so that he loves the contrary. Then he who by injustice seems so shamed that greedy he becometh for revenge. And such must needs prepare for others' harm. This triform love is wept for here below. But now I'd have thee hear about the other, which runs to love in a corrupted way. All apprehend confusedly a good wherein the mind can rest and long for it, and therefore every one attempts to reach it. If slothful be the love impelling you to see or win it after just repentance, this present cornice tortures you for that. Another good there is, which never makes men happy. It is not real happiness, nor the good essence, fruit and root of all that's good. The love that yields too much to that is wept for in three rings above us here. But why it's reckoned threefold I say not, that thou mayst seek the reason for thyself.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 17. Section 52 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 18. Purgatory, the fourth ring. Sloth. Love and free will. Instances of punished sloth.
The lofty doctor, having ended thus his argument, was looking in my eyes, eager to see if I seemed satisfied, and I, who by new thirst was still spurred on, was silent outwardly, and in me said, My many questions trouble him perhaps. But that true father who perceived the wish, which being shy did not disclose itself, by speaking first emboldened me to speak. Hence I, my vision, teacher, in thy light becomes so keen, that clearly I discern all that thy talk implieth or unfolds. I therefore beg of thee, sweet father dear, explain to me why thou ascribest to love every good action and its contrary.
Direct thine understanding's sharpened eyes toward me,
He said,
and clear to thee will be the error of the blind who pose as guides. The mind, which is created prone to love, inclines toward everything that pleases it, when roused by pleasure to activity. Your faculty of apprehending draws an image from a reality, and so displays it in you that your mind is caused to turn to it. And if thus turned your mind inclines thereto, that tendency is love, is nature bound in you again by pleasure. Then, just as fire, by reason of its form, moves upward, being made for mounting thither, where in its element it longer lasts, even so the captive mind begins to yearn, a motion of the soul, and never rests until the thing it loveth gives it joy. Apparent to thee now can be the extent to which the truth is hid from those that claim that each love in itself deserveth praise, because, perhaps, its object in itself seems always to be good, and yet not good is every seal, though good may be its wax.
Thy words, together with my heeding mind, I answered him, have shown me what love is. But this hath made me bigger with a doubt. For if love from without us is born in us, and if the soul can do naught else, her doing all right or wrong is no desert of hers. And he,
What reason sees here I can tell thee. For aught beyond its ken, look thou alone to Beatrice, for that's a work of faith. Every substantial form which is distinct from matter, and is also joined with it, hath in it a specific power collected, which, save in operation, is not seen, and only shows itself in its effects, as life doth by its green leaves in a plant. None knows, however, whence the understanding of first cognitions comes, or whence the bent toward those first appetites which are in you, as zeal for making honey is in bees? This first will, hence, deserves nor praise nor blame. Now, that all others be conformed to this, the power which counsels inborn is in you, and ought to hold the threshold of assent. This is the source, whence comes the ground of merit in you, as it gathers in, and winnows out, your good and guilty loves. Those who in reasoning attained the bottom perceived this inborn liberty, and left the world the teachings of morality. Supposing then that every love that flames within you rises of necessity, within you lies the power to master it. This noble virtue is by Beatrice called freedom of the will. Hence see that thou recall it, should she speak of it to thee.
The moon in rising, close to midnight late, and looking like a bucket all on fire, was causing now the stars to seem more rare. As, counter to the heavens, it coursed the paths the sun inflames, whene'er the Roman sees it setting between the Sards and Corsicans. And now that noble shade whence Pietola hath greater fame than any Mantuan village, had put aside the load I laid on him. Hence I, who, as an answer to my questions, had reaped his clear and easy talk, remained like one confused because of drowsiness. But suddenly this sleepiness of mine was taken from me by a crowd of people, who back of us were circling toward us now. And as Ismenus and Asopus once along their banks saw maddened throngs at night, whene'er the Thebans needed Bacchus, such were those who, sweeping scythe-like round that ring, were coming on, from what I saw of them, by good-will ridden and by righteous love. And soon were they upon us, for the whole of that great crowd was moving at a run, and two ahead in tears were crying out,
Mary proceeded to the hills in haste.
And
Caesar, in order to subdue Ilerda, struck Marseille, then hurried on to Spain.
Quick, quick, lest time be lost through lack of love.
cried those that came behind them.
So that zeal in doing good may make grace green again.
O folk, in whom keen fervour now redeems, perhaps, the negligence and slowness shown by your tepidity in doing good. This man who lives, and truly I lie not, desires, when sunlight once returns, to mount. Hence tell us where the nearest opening lies.
These were my leader's words, and one of those same spirits said,
Come on, behind us then, and thou wilt find the hole. So keen we are to keep on moving that we cannot stop. Forgive us then, if lack of courtesy thou deem what we consider righteousness. I was San Zenos abbot at Verona, under the rule of worthy Barbarossa, of whom Milan in sorrow talketh still. And he has one foot in the grave already, who soon will for that monastery weep and grieve, because he had it in his power. For he his son, in body wholly sick, worse still in mind and also ill begot, has had installed in its true shepherd's place.
I know not if aught else he said or ceased, so far had he run past us now, but this I heard, and I've enjoyed retaining it. Then he who was my help in every need said,
Turn in this direction, and behold two coming on, who give a bite to sloth.
Moving behind them all, they said,
The folk for whom the sea was opened up were dead before the Jordan had perceived their heirs, and those who with the son of Anchises could not endure to toil unto the end gave themselves up to lead inglorious lives.
Then, when those shades were separated from us so far that they no longer could be seen, a new thought made its way into my mind, whence many other different thoughts were born. And I between them so confused became, that wandering to and fro I closed mine eyes, and changed what I had thought into a dream.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 18. Section 53 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 19. Purgatory, the fourth ring. Sloth, Dante's second dream. The Angel of Zeal, the fifth ring. Avarice and prodigality.
Within the hour when, vanquished by the earth, or even at times by Saturn, daytime's heat can warm the coldness of the moon no longer, when geomancers see their greater fortune rise in the east ere dawn, and on a path which doth not long stay dark for it, a female approached me in a dream, with stammering tongue, with eyes asquint, and crooked on her feet, with hands lopped off, and pallor on her face. I fixed my gaze on her, and as the sun brings comfort to cold limbs which night-time chills, even so my looking at her freed her tongue, and afterward, in but a little time, completely straightened her, and gave that hue to her discoloured face which love desires. As soon as she had thus unloosed her speech, she then began to sing in such a way that from her I could hardly take my gaze.
I am,
she sang,
the lovely Siren, she who in mid-ocean mariners bewitches, so much I please whoever heareth me. I turned Ulysses from his wandering course to hear my song, and who gets used to me seldom departs, so wholly I content him.
Her mouth had not yet closed, when lo, a holy lady at my side appeared, who ready was to put her to confusion.
"O Virgil, Virgil, who is this?"
she cried in scornful tones, whereat he then advanced with eyes set only on the modest one. She seized the other, opened her in front, and rent her garments, showing me her belly. This woke me with the stench that issued from it. I turned my eyes, and my good teacher said,
I've called thee thrice at least. Arise and come. We'll find the gate through which thou mayst ascend.
I rose, and all the holy mountain's rings were with the high day's light already filled, as with the new sun back of us we moved. While I was following him, I held my head like one who, having it bowed down by thought, makes of himself a half arch of a bridge. And then I heard,
"Come on, the pass is here,"
uttered in such a gentle, kindly way as in this mortal land is never heard. With outspread wings, which seemed the wings of swans, he who thus spoke directed us on high 'tween the two side walls of the granite rock. He moved his pinions then, and fanning us, affirmed that those who mourn are happy, since possessed of comfort shall their spirits be.
What aileth thee, that only on the ground thou gazest?
said my guide, when past the angel both he and I had climbed a little way. And I, a recent dream which to itself inclines me, makes me with such doubt advance, that I cannot refrain from thought of it.
Thou hast perceived,
said he,
that ancient witch, who henceforth o'er us is alone lamented, and seen how from her one is freed. Let that suffice thee. Strike thy heels upon the ground, and turn thine eyes up toward the calling lure the eternal King whirls with the mighty wheels.
As is the falcon, which at first looks down, then turns around when called, and spreads his wings, keen for the quarry which attracts him. Such was I, and thus as long as ere the rock was cleft, to make a path for those that climb, I went along to where the circling starts. When out upon the fifth ring I had come, people therein I saw who, shedding tears, were lying wholly prone upon its bed.
My soul hath cloven to the trodden ground,
I heard them saying with such heavy sighs, that what they said could hardly be made out.
O ye elect of God, whose sufferings here justice and hope are making less intense, direct us toward the steps that lead on high.
If ye are come exempt from lying down, and wish to find the path with greatest speed, let your right sides be always outward turned.
Thus asked the poet, and not far ahead, thus was the answer given. Hence as he spoke, I noticed where the other speaker hid, and then I turned mine eyes unto my lord, whereat he granted with a cheerful nod that which the looks of my desiring asked. When I was free to act as I inclined, I came and stood above the soul, whose words had made me notice him at first, and said, Spirit, who by thy tears art ripening that, without which one cannot return to God, For my sake stay a while thy greater care. Say who thou wast, why ye hold up your backs, and whether thou wouldst have me get thee aught from there whence I, a living man, set forth. And he to me,
Why toward itself the sky is turning here our backs thou'lt know. But first, know thou that I once sat in Peter's chair. 'Tween Siestri and Chiavri there descends a lovely mountain stream, and from its name my race's title takes its greatest boast. For 1 month, and a little more, I felt how much the mighty mantle waits on him who keeps it from the mire, for all loads else seem feathers. My conversion was, alas, delayed. But when Rome's shepherd I was made, I came to know how false the world's life was. I saw that in it hearts can find no rest, nor could one in it higher rise than I. The love of this life hence was kindled in me. Till that time I had been a wretched soul, cut off from God, and wholly given to greed. Now, as thou seest, I'm punished for it here. What avarice doth is here made manifest in this purgation of converted souls, nor hath this mount a penalty more bitter. And as our eyes were never upward turned, because intently fixed on earthly things, so justice here hath turned them to the ground. As avarice quenched our love for all good things, until well-doing had completely ceased, so here doth justice hold us in restraint, bound fast and fettered in our hands and feet, and here we'll stay, stretched out and motionless, as long as it shall please the righteous Lord.
I had knelt down and wished to speak, but just as I began, and he was made aware by listening only of my reverence.
What cause,
said he,
hath bent thee downward thus?
And I to him, because of your high rank my conscience troubled me for standing up.
Straighten thy legs, my brother,
he replied,
and rise. Err not. With thee and with the rest, a fellow servant of one power am I. If thou hast ever fully understood those holy gospel words, they neither marry, well canst thou see why I am speaking thus. And now begone, I'd have thee stay no more, for, lingering here, thou hinderest the tears, wherewith I ripen that which thou hast said. A niece I have up yonder, called Elijah, good in herself. So be it that our house by its example do not make her bad, and she is all that's left me up there.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 19. Section 54 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 20. Purgatory, the fifth ring. Avarice and prodigality. Instances of liberality and of greed. The earthquake.
A will fights weakly 'gainst a stronger will. Hence I, myself displeasing, him to please, out of the water drew my sponge unfilled. I started, and along the space left clear close to the rocky cliff my leader moved, as 'neath its battlements one hugs a wall. For those who through their eyes pour drop by drop the evil which pervadeth all the world, approach too closely to the outer edge. Be thou accursed, thou ancient wolf, that prey far greater hast than have all other beasts, by reason of thy hunger's endless depth. O heaven, through whose revolving some it seems believe that here below conditions change, when will he come through whom this beast shall leave? As on we went with slow and scanted steps, and I was listening to the shades I heard weeping and uttering piteous lamentations, by chance I heard in front of us a voice cry out,
Sweet Mary!
in the tearful tones wherewith a woman cries in childbirth's pangs, and this was followed by,
As poor thou wast, as by the hostelry may be perceived where thou didst lay thy sacred burden down.
Next after this I heard,
O good Fabricius, with virtue thou didst poverty prefer to great possessions with iniquity.
So pleasing had these last words been to me, that further on I moved, that I might know the spirit from whose lips they seemed to come. He now was speaking of the generous gift bestowed by Nicholas upon the maids, to guide their youth into an honoured path. O soul, that speakest of such worthy deeds, say who thou wast, said I, and why alone thou thus renewest this deserved praise. Thy words will not remain without reward, if I return to end that life's short course which flieth onward toward its final term. And he,
I'll tell it thee, though not for help, that I may look for yonder, but because grace shines so brightly in thee, ere thy death. I was the root of that malignant plant, whose shadow darkens all the Christian land, so that good fruit is seldom picked from it. But if Douai, Lille, Ghent, and Bruges could, vengeance would soon be wrought for this, and I of him request it, who is judge of all. Yonder my name was Hugh Capet. From me have sprung the Philips and the Louises, who have in recent ages governed France. A Paris butcher's son I was, when all the ancient kings had passed away save one, a grey-robed monk. Tight in my hands I found the bridle of the kingdom's government, with so much power of recent gain, and such a host of friends, that to the widowed crown was raised the head of mine own son, with whom the line of their anointed bones began. As long as its great dowry of Provence had not deprived my family of shame, its worth was small, but still it did no harm. With that began its theft by force and fraud, for afterward, to make amends, Ponthieu it ceased, with Normandy and Gascony. Charles came to Italy, and there to make amends, a victim made of Conradin, and then, to make amends, drove Thomas back to heaven. A time I see, not very long from now, which out of France will bring another Charles, to make both him and his the better known. He issues thence alone, and with no host, but with the jousting lance of Judas. This he thrust so, that he burst the paunch of Florence. As a result, not land, but sin and shame he'll win, of so much greater weight for him. The lighter he accounts such loss. I see the other Charles, once captured from his ship, his daughters sell and haggle for the price, as corsairs do with slave girls not their own. What more, O avarice, canst thou do with us, since thou hast to thyself so drawn my race, that even for its own flesh it careth not? That future ills and past ones may seem less, I see Alagna by the lily entered, and, in his vicar, Christ a prisoner made. I see the latter mocked a second time. I see the vinegar and gall removed, and him I see 'mong living robbers killed. And this new Pilate I behold so ruthless, that, not content with this, he lawlessly into the temple bears his greedy sails. O when, my lord, shall I rejoice to see the vengeance in thy secret counsel hid, which now avails to make thine anger sweet? What of the Holy Spirit's only bride? I said just now, and thereby made thee turn to me for explanation, serves as answer to all our prayers, as long as daylight lasts. But soon as night returns, instead of these, we utter words which sound the opposite. We thereupon rehearse Pygmalion's story, and how of him his greedy lust for gold a traitor made, a thief, a parasite, and avaricious Midas' misery, which followed from his covetous request, and at which one will always have to laugh. Next, foolish Achan every one recalls, who stole the plunder, so that even here the wrath of Joshua seems to bite him still. We then accuse Sapphira with her husband. We praise the kicks which Heliodorus got, while Polymnestor circles all the mount in infamy, who Polydorus killed. And finally our cry is, "Tell us, Crassus, for thou dost know it, what's the taste of gold?" Aloud at times speak one, another low, as each one's feelings spur him on to speak, in stronger now and now in weaker tones. Hence I, in speaking of the god, which here is talked about by day, was not alone, but near us here none other spoke aloud.
Already had we gone away from him, striving to make our way along the path as fast as was allowed our powers, when I, like something falling, felt the mountain quake. Then such a chill took hold of me as he is wont to have who goeth to his death. Delos indeed shook not so terribly before Latona made therein her nest, in order to give birth to heaven's two eyes. Then such a cry arose on every side, that close to me my teacher drew, and said,
Be not afraid, while I am guiding thee.
Glory to God.
They all said,
In the highest.
as far as I could understand from those near by, where what was being shouted could be heard. Both motionless and in suspense we stood, as stood the shepherds who first heard that song, till when the trembling stopped, the shouting ceased. Thereafter we resumed our holy journey, watching the shades that lay upon the ground, returned already to their wonted plaint. No ignorance had ever with as great anxiety made me desire to know, unless in this my memory go astray, as that which, as I thought, I seemed to have. I neither dared to ask, because of haste, nor could I see there anything myself. So on I went, timid and lost in thought.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 20. Section 55 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 21. Purgatory, the fifth ring. Avarice and prodigality. Statius, the cause of the earthquake.
The natural thirst, which can never be quenched, save by the water asked for by the lowly young woman of Samaria as a boon, was troubling me, while hurry spurred me on behind my leader o'er the cumbered path, and I was grieving for the just revenge. Then lo, Luke records for us that Christ, when risen from the burial cave, appeared before the two upon the road. A shade appeared, and came behind us as we watched the crowd which lay around us at our feet. But we perceived him not, hence he spoke first, and said,
May God, my brethren, give you peace.
We turned at once, and to this greeting Virgil replied with that which corresponds to it. Then he began,
Within the blessed assembly mayst thou be set at peace, by that just cord which in eternal exile bindeth me.
What?
He replied, as quickly on we went.
If ye are shades whom God deigns not on high, who guided you so far along his stairs?
My teacher then,
If thou regard the marks which this one bears, and which the angel draws, thou'lt see that with the good he needs must reign. But whereas she, who spinneth night and day, had not as yet drawn off for him the flax which Clotho lays and packs for every one, his soul, which sister is to thee and me, could not in climbing here come up alone, because it seeth not as we. Hence I out of the ample throat of hell was drawn to show the way to him, and I shall show it, as far as e'er my school can lead him on. But tell us, if thou knowest, why the mountain shook so just now, and why all seemed to shout with one accord down to its oozy base.
Thus by his asking he had threaded so the needle's eye of my desire, that merely with hope my thirst had come to be less craving. The former then began,
Nothing exists which this mount's sacred government can feel, that void of order is or 'gainst its wont. From every change this place up here is free. Whate'er heaven's self from its own self receives can be the cause of it, and nothing else. For neither rain, nor hail, nor snow, nor dew, nor frost falls any higher up than lies the little stairway of the 3 short steps. Clouds neither dense or rarefied appear, nor lightning flashes, nor yet Thomas' daughter, who often changes quarter in the world. Dry vapor goes no higher than the top of those 3 steps whereof I spoke to thee, and on which Peter's vicar had his feet. Below, perhaps, it trembles more or less, but never quakes up here because of wind concealed, I know not how, inside the earth. It trembles here whenever any soul feels pure enough to rise or starts to climb, and such a cry as this endorses it. Of purity the will alone gives proof, which, seizing on the soul, now wholly free to change its company, by willing helps it. It wills this from the first, but that desire, which gains the will God's justice turns toward pain, as it was once toward sin, allows it not. And I, who have 500 years and more lain in this woe, felt only now within me a free volition for a better sphere. That's why thou didst the earthquake feel, and hear the pious spirits on this mountain praise that Lord, who soon, I pray, will send them up.
He thus addressed us, and since one in drink delights, according as his thirst is great, I could not say how much he did me good. And my wise leader,
Now I see the net which holds you here, and how it opens, why it trembles here, and why ye all rejoice. Now who thou wast be pleased to let me know, and also let thy words include for me, why thou hast lain so many centuries here.
At that time, when, helped by the Most High King, good Titus took due vengeance for the wounds, from which came forth the blood by Judas sold, I was in great renown.
That spirit said,
Up yonder with the name which longest lasts, and honours most, but not as yet with faith. So sweet my song, that, though to loosen, Rome drew me to herself, where I deserved to have my temples crowned with myrtle wreath. Statius they call me still up there. Of Thebes I sang, of great Achilles next. But neath this second load I sank upon the way. The seeds of my enthusiasm were the sparks which warmed me, of that fire divine wherewith more than 1,000 poets are inflamed. I mean the innate, which my mother was and nurse in poetry, and lacking which not by a drachm's weight had I stirred the scales. And to have lived on earth when Virgil lived, to one son's period more would I consent than what I owe to issue from my ban.
These words turned Virgil toward me with a look which silently,
Be silent,
said, and yet the power that wills cannot do everything. For tears and laughter follow so the passion, from which they each take rise, that least of all do they obey the will in those most truthful. I only smiled like one who winks, whereat the shade kept still, and looked into my eyes, wherein expression is most fixed, and said,
So mayst thou bring unto a happy end so great a toil? Why was it that thy face showed me just now the flashing of a smile?
I now am caught on one side and the other. One asks for silence, the other conjures me to speak. I therefore sigh, and by my teacher am understood.
Be not afraid to talk,
the latter said to me,
but speak, and tell him what he so eagerly desires to know.
I therefore said, Perhaps thou marvellest, O ancient spirit, at the smile I gave, but I would have still greater wonder seize thee. This spirit here, who upward leads mine eyes, that Virgil is, from whom thou didst of old derive the strength to sing of men and gods. If thou hast given my smile some other cause, leave it as not the true one, and believe it was the words thyself didst say of him. Already was he stooping to embrace my teacher's feet, but he said,
Brother, no, for thou a shade now dost a shade behold.
Rising, he said,
Thou now canst understand the sum of love which warmeth me toward thee, since I forget our disembodied state, and act with shades as if they solid were.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 21. Section 56 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 22. Purgatory, Statius, the Angel of Justice, the Sixth Ring, Gluttony, Instances of Temperance.
Already was the angel left behind, the angel who had toward the sixth ring turned us, after erasing from my face a wound. And he had said to us that those are blessed whose longing is for justice, and his words, with nothing further, ended this with thirst. Hence, lighter now than at the other passes, I so advanced that I, without fatigue, was following up the spirits who were swift, when Virgil thus began:
A love that flames, by virtue kindled, always lights another, if but its flame be outwardly revealed. And therefore, from the hour when Juvenal, who let me know thy love for me, came down among us in the borderland of hell, my good will hath been such toward thee, that none e'er bound me more to one I had not seen. These stairs will, therefore, now seem short to me. But tell me, and forgive me as a friend, if too great confidence relax my rein, and as a friend converse with me henceforth. How was it Avarice could find a place within thy breast together with such wisdom, as that wherewith thou by thy zeal wast filled?
At first these words made Statius smile a little, and then he answered,
Every word of thine is of thy love for me a precious proof. Things of a truth quite frequently appear, which offer one false arguments for doubt, because the real occasions are concealed. Thy question makes me sure of thy belief, due maybe to the ring where I was found, that I was in the last life avaricious. Know then that avarice was too far from me, and that this lack of temperance on my part thousands of courses of the moon have punished. And were it not that I corrected me when I had understood thee in thy cry, indignant, as it were, with human nature, why dost thou not, O virtue's love of gold, govern the appetite of mortal men? I now, by rolling, feel the wretched jousts. I then perceived that hens could ope their wings too much in spending, and repented me of that, as well as of my other sins. How many from the grave shall hairless rise, through ignorance which, in life and at the last, deprives them of repentance for this fault? Know too that any fault which of a sin is just the opposite, together with it drieth its green leaves here. If therefore I, to purge myself, have been among the folk who avarice bewail, to me it happened because of what was contrary thereto.
When thou didst sing then of the cruel strife between the two afflictions of Jocasta,
said he who sang bucolic songs,
by that which Clio singeth with thee there, the faith without which doing good is not enough, had not, it seems, yet made thee a believer. If this be so, what sun, or else what candles, lightened thy darkness so, that thou thereafter didst set thy sails behind the fisherman?
Thou first didst send me to Parnassus' slopes to drink,
he said to him,
and then the first thou wast who next to God illumined me. Thou didst like him who, when he walks by night, a light behind him bears nor helps himself, but maketh those that follow after see, when thou didst say, the age renews itself, justice returns, and man's primeval times, as down from heaven a newborn race descends. Through thee a poet I became, through thee a Christian. But that thou mayst better see my sketch, I'll set my hand to colour it. Pregnant already with the true belief, sowed by the eternal kingdom's messengers, was every portion of the whole wide world. And now thy words, to which I've just referred, with these new preachers harmonized so well, that I became accustomed to frequent them. Thereat so holy did they come to seem, that when the mission persecuted them, their lamentations did not lack my tears. And while I still remained in yonder world, I helped them, and their upright mode of life caused me to treat with scorn all other sects. And ere in poetry I led the Greeks to see the streams of Thebes, baptized I was, and yet through fear, a secret Christian only, I long pretended faith in paganism. This lukewarmness around the fourth ring moved me till far beyond the fourth centennial year. Thou, therefore, that didst lift the covering veil which hid from me the good whereof I speak, tell me, while we have still a little more to climb, where our old Terence is, and where Cecilius, Plotus, Varro, if thou know. Tell me if they are damned, and in what ward.
Both they and Persius, I and many others,
my leader answered him,
are with the Greek, whom more than any else the Muses nursed in the first circle of the sightless prison, and frequently we talk about the mount which always hath our nurses on its slopes. Euripides and Antiphon are there, with us Simonides and Agathon, and many other Greeks, who once adorned their brows with laurel. There, of thine own folk, Antigone is seen, Deiphyle, Argia, and, as sad as once, Ismene. There too may she be seen who showed Langia. There is Tiresias' daughter, Thetis also, and with her sisters there Deidamia.
And now the poets both of them were silent, intent again on looking round, since free from climbing up and free from walls, and while 4 handmaids of the day had dropped behind, the 5th was at the sun-car's pole, still upward pointing its burning horn, whereat my leader,
I think that it behooves us now to turn our right sides toward the outer edge, and circle the mountain as our wont it is to do.
thus was our custom, our instructor there, and with less doubt we started on again, because of that deserving soul's ascent. In front they went, and I behind, alone, listening the while to what they had to say, which gave me understanding for my verse. But soon their pleasant talk a tree broke off, which in the middle of the road we found, with fruit agreeable and sweet to smell. And as a fir tree tapers up from branch to branch, so likewise this one tapered down, in order, I believe, that none may climb it. And on the side on which our path was closed, down from the lofty cliff a limpid stream was falling, and spraying upward o'er its leaves. Then toward the tree the 2 bards turned their steps, and from among its leaves a voice cried out,
"Of this food there will be for you a dearth."
Then,
"More did Mary think of honouring the marriage feast and making it complete, than of her mouth, which pleadeth now for you. The ancient Roman women were content with water for their only drink, and Daniel thought little of his food, but wisdom gained. The primal age was beautiful as gold. With hunger it made acorns sweet to taste, and nectar every little brook with thirst. Honey and flying locusts were the food which fed the Baptist in the wilderness. Hence he is now as glorious and as great as by the gospel is revealed to you."
End of Purgatorio, Canto 22. Section 57 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 23. Purgatory, the 6th ring. Gluttony. The punishment of gluttons. Forese donati.
while I, as likewise he is wont to do who wastes his life in hunting little birds, was piercing thus the green leaves with mine eyes, my more than father said to me,
My son, come on now, for the time assigned to us should be more usefully distributed.
I turned my face, and no less soon my steps, behind the sages, who so talked that walking they caused to be of no expense to me. Then lo, in tearful and in singing tones,
My lips,
was heard in such a way that to delight and sorrow it gave birth. O gentle father, what is that I hear? Said I. And he then,
Shades who, moving on, loosen perhaps the knot of what they owe.
as pilgrim travellers do, who lost in thought on meeting unknown people on the road, turn round to look at them, but do not stop. Even so behind us, though more quickly moving, there came a band of souls, who as they passed, devout and silent, gazed at us in wonder. Each was expressionless and hollow-eyed, pale in his face, and lacking so in flesh, that of his bones his skin assumed the shape. I do not think that even Erysichthon became so withered into utter skin, because of fasting, when he feared it most. Thinking within myself, I said, Behold the people who once lost Jerusalem when Mary thrust her beak into her son. The sockets of their eyes seemed gemless rings, and he that Omo reads in human faces would surely there have recognized the M, Who would believe the perfume of a fruit and odour of a water could so act and cause such craving, if he knew not how? I still was wondering what so famished them, because the reason of their being lean and of their wretched scurf was not yet clear, when lo, a shade from deep within his head, turning his eyes toward me, looked hard, and then cried out aloud,
"What grace is this to me?"
I never should have known him by his face, but that to me was in his voice revealed, which in itself his aspect had suppressed. That spark rekindled all that I had known of that disfigured countenance, and thus I recognized it as Forese's face.
"Ah, prithee, heed not the dried-up scab,"
he pleaded,
"which discolours thus my skin, nor any lack of flesh that I may have, but tell the truth about thyself, and who those two souls are who bear thee company. Refrain no longer from addressing me."
I answered him, thy face, which once as dead I mourned for, gives me now no smaller cause for weeping, that I see it so disfigured. For God's sake tell me then what strips you thus. Make me not talk and wonder too, for ill can he converse who longs for something else.
"A virtue from the eternal will,"
he said,
"comes down into the water and the tree we left behind, whereby I thus grow lean. And all these people who in tears are singing, because of following unchecked love of food, are here re-sanctified in thirst and hunger. The pleasant odour issuing from the fruit, and from the spray which o'er the verdure spreads, kindles in us the wish to eat and drink. And not once only is our pain renewed, as on this floor we move around. Our pain, I say, though solace sought to be my word, for to the tree doth that same longing lead us, which once led Christ in happiness to cry, 'My God!' when with his blood he set us free."
And I to him, Forese, from the day when thou didst for a better life change world, 5 years have not yet rolled away till now. If power of sinning further ended in thee before the coming of that happy hour of sorrow, which re-weddeth us to God, how is it thou art come up here? I thought that I should find thee still below, down there, where time restores itself by means of time, whence he to me.
My Nella, with the tears which streamed from her, enabled me to drink the pleasant wormwood of this pain so soon. She, with her pious prayers and with her sighs, hath drawn me from the hillside where one waits, and freed me from the other lower rings. So much the dearer a delight to God is my poor widow whom I loved so much, the more alone she is in doing right, for far more modest in its women is the wild Barbagia region of Sardinia than the Barbagia which I left her in. O my dear brother, what wouldst have me say? I have, e'en now, a future time in sight, to which this hour will not be very old, when from the pulpits shameless Florence women will be prohibited to go abroad showing their bosoms with the breasts exposed. What Barbary women or what Saracens e'er needed spiritual or other laws to keep them covered up when going out? But if the shameless ones were sure of what a swiftly moving heaven prepares for them, their mouths for howling would be open now; for, if my foresight here deceive me not, they'll grieve, ere that one's cheek grows hair who still is hushed with lullabies. Now, brother, see, I pray, that from me thou no longer hide. Thou seest that not only I, but all these people gaze where thou dost veil the sun.
Hence I to him, if thou recall to mind what thou with me wast once, and with thee I, still grievous will our present memory be. Who goes before me turned me from that life the other day, when that one sister round was seen by you, and at the sun I pointed. Through the deep night hath he conducted me, and from among the truly dead, still clothed in this real flesh, which follows in his steps. Thence his encouragements have drawn me on, as up I climbed, and circled round the mount, which straightens you whom crooked made the world. He says that he will make me his companion, till there I am where Beatrice shall be. Up there without him must I needs remain. Virgil is he who tells me so, at him I pointed, and this other one, the shade, because of whom just now on every slope your realm, which from itself removes him, quaked.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 23. Section 58 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 24. Purgatory, the sixth ring. Gluttony. Instances of gluttony. The Angel of Temperance.
Speaking slowed not our gait, nor did our gait our speaking, but still talking we went on apace, as by a fair wind driven, a ship. The shades, meanwhile, who looked like things twice dead, drew wonder through their hollowed eyes at me, when they perceived that I was still alive. And I, continuing my talking, said, He, for another's sake, is going up more slowly than perhaps he else would do. But if thou know, say where Picarda is, and whether I see any here worth noting among these people who so gaze at me.
My sister who, 'tween fair and good, was most, I know not which, on high Olympus triumphs, happy already in the crown she wears.
This he said first, and then,
We're not forbid to name each here, since by our abstinence our aspects are so greatly milked away. This Bonajunta is.
His finger showed him.
The Luca Bonajunta, while the face beyond him, more embroidered than the rest, had in his arms the Holy Church. Of Tours he was, and now, by fasting, expiates Bolsena's eels and rare Vernaccia wine.
And many more he named me one by one, and all, when named, seemed satisfied, hence I, because of this, saw not a gloomy act. Using their teeth through hunger, though in vain, I saw both Ubaldino della Pila and Boniface, who pastured with his crook much folk. I Ser Marchese saw, who once had time to drink less dryly at Forlì, yet such he was, that he did not feel sated. But as one looks, and more of one man thinks than of another, so did I at him of Lucca, who, it seemed, most wished to know me. He murmured, and I heard I know not what about Gentuca, uttered where he felt the wound of justice which consumes them so. O soul, that seem'st so fain to speak to me, said I, so do that I may understand, and with thy words appease thyself and me.
There is a woman born,
he then began,
nor weareth yet a veil, who, howsoever it be reproached, shall cause my town to please thee. With this provision shalt thou now go on, and if by what I murmured thou wast led astray, events shall make it clear to thee. But tell me whether him I here behold, who those new rhymes produced, which thus began, Ye ladies, who well know what loving is.
And him I answered, I am one who heed when love within me breathes, and outwardly express myself as in me love dictates.
O brother, now I see,
said he,
the bar which kept this side of the sweet new style I hear, the notary, Guiton, and myself. I clearly see that your pens closely follow in the dictator's wake, which certainly was not the case with ours, and he who further sets himself most to look between these styles perceives no other difference.
Whereupon, as if content with this, he ceased to speak. As birds that spend the winter along the Nile form in the air at times a flock, and then with greater speed fly on, and in a line advance, so likewise all the people there quickened their steps with faces turned around, since through their leanness light, and through their will. And as a man who wearies of running lets his companions go, and only walks, until the panting of his chest has ceased, even so Forese let the holy flock pass on, and saying,
When shall I again behold thee?
Came along behind with me. I know not, I replied, how long I'll live, but I shall not so soon return that sooner I shall not with my will be on the shore, because the place where I was set to live strips itself further day by day of goodness, and now to dismal ruin seems ordained.
Now go,
said he,
for him I see who most hath blame for this, behind a beast's tail dragged down to the vale, where none e'er frees himself from fault. The beast with every step goes faster, and ever faster, till it hurls him down and leaves his body in disgraceful plight. Those fears have not much further to revolve.
He raised his eyes toward heaven.
Ere clear to thee will that become which my words can explain no more. Stay now behind, for in this realm so precious is our time, that, coming thus at even pace with thee, I lose too much.
As at a gallop from a riding troop a horseman issues forth at times, and goes to win the honour of the first encounter, so he with longer strides departed from us, and on the road with those two I remained, who of the world such mighty marshals were. When he had gone so far ahead that now mine eyes became such followers of his form as of his words my mind, the heavy laden and living branches of another tree appeared before me not so far away, since toward it I had only then turned round. Beneath it folk I saw with upraised hands, who toward the foliage cried I know not what, like eager children who in vain beseech, while he, to whom they pray, replieth not, but with a view to make their longing keen, holds what they long for up and hides it not. They then departed as if undeceived, and thereupon to that great tree we came, which turns away so many prayers and tears.
Pass on without approaching. Higher up a tree there is, which bitten was by Eve, and this one is an offshoot sprung from that.
Thus said I know not who among the branches. Hence Virgil, I, and Statius, close together, advanced along the side which rises up.
Recall,
he said,
those cursed cloud-born creatures, who gorged with food and drink, gainst Theseus strove with double breasts. The Hebrews too recall, who at their drinking showed that they were soft, whence as his fellows Gideon had them not, when he on Median down the hills advanced.
Thus, hugging close one margin of the ring, we passed, and heard of gluttonies, which once were followed by distressful gains. Then, spreading out across the lonely path, more than 1,000 steps had borne us on, in contemplation each, without a word.
What think ye three, as thus alone ye go?
A voice cried suddenly, whereat I started, as scared and sluggish beasts are wont to do. I raised my head to see who this might be, and ne'er were metals in a furnace seen, or glass as red and bright as one I saw, who said,
If ye are pleased to mount above, ye must in this direction turn aside. This way goes he who goes in quest of peace.
His aspect had bereft me of my sight. I therefore turned and stepped behind my teachers, like one who guides his feet by what he hears. And as when heralding the light of dawn the breeze of May sheds fragrance as it stirs, all redolent of grasses and of flowers, so 'gainst my brow I felt a zephyr's stroke, and well perceived the motion of the wing which made me scent ambrosian odours there.
Blessed are they whom so much grace illumes,
I heard one saying,
that the love of taste stirs not too great a longing in their breast, but always hunger only as is right.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 24. Section 59 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 25. Purgatory, the seventh ring. Lust. Sensuality punished. Instances of chastity.
The hour was when ascent brooked no delay, because the sun had left the noontime ring to Taurus, as to Scorpio had the night. Therefore, as doth a man who, whatsoe'er appear to him, stops not, but goes his way, if spurred by goading of necessity, so, one before the other, through the gap we entered in, and took the flight of stairs which by its narrowness parts those who climb. And like the little stork which lifts its wings, because it longs to fly, but ventures not to leave its nest, and lets them droop again, even such was I, with kindled and with quenched desire to ask, when coming to the act of one who starts to speak. Nor, though our pace was fast, did my dear father check himself, but said to me,
Discharge the bow of speech, which to the arrowhead thou now hast drawn.
With confidence I opened then my mouth, and said, How can one possibly grow lean, where need of nourishment doth not obtain?
Shouldst thou recall,
he said,
how, when the brand was burning, Meleager was consumed, this would not be so difficult for thee. And shouldst thou think how, at your quivering, your image quivers in the looking-glass, that which seems hard to thee would easy seem. But that thou ease thee to thy heart's content, lo, here is Statius. Him I call and beg that he be now a healer of thy wounds.
If I unfold for him the eternal view when in thy presence.
Statius then replied,
Be my excuse that I cannot refuse thee.
He then began,
If, son, thy mind shall hear and understand my words, they'll prove a light for thee unto the how which thou dost ask. The perfect blood which by the thirsty veins is never drunk, but stays as doth the food which from the table thou dost take away, gets in the heart a power informative for all the human members, being that which floweth through the veins to form the same. When redigested, it flows down to parts whereof more seemly silence is than speech. Then on another's blood it trickles thence into the natural vessel. There both meet, passive the one, the other active, since perfect the place from which it was distilled. Joining the former, it begins to work, coagulating first, then quickening that which it had formed as matter for itself. The active virtue now become a soul, as of a plant, though so far differing from it, that this is on its way and that arrived. So worketh next, that now it moves and feels like fungi of the sea, then undertakes to organize the powers whose germ it is. That virtue, son, now spreads and now extends, which from the generator's heart derives, where nature on all members is intent. But how from animal it comes to be a child, thou seest not yet. A point so hard, it led a wiser man than thou so far astray, that in his teaching from the soul he parted the potential intellect, because he saw no organ it assumed. Open thy mind unto the coming truth, and know that when the brain's organization is in the fetus to perfection brought, the primal mover, glad of such a work of nature, turns toward it, and breathes therein a spirit new and full of powers, which draws into its substance what it active finds therein, and so becomes a single soul, which lives and feels, and on itself reflects. And that the less thou wonder at my words, consider how to wine the sons he turns, when joined to juices flowing from the vine. When lachesis hath no more thread, the soul frees itself from the flesh and bears away, potentially, the human and divine. Mute one and all the other faculties, with memory, intelligence, and will far keener in their action than before. Then, without stopping, of itself it falls in wondrous way to one or other shore. Here first it learns its road. As soon as place has circumscribed it there, the forming virtue raised round it in the same degree and way as when the members were alive it did. And as the air, when fully charged with rain, is by another's rays, which it reflects within itself, adorned with many hues, so here the neighboring air takes on the shape, the soul, which settled there, and presses on it, as would a seal, by its own forming power. And afterward, as doth the little flame, which follows fire where'er it changes place, so the new shape accompanies its spirit, which, since it hence takes visibility, is called a shade, and therewith organizes each of the senses up to that of sight. By means of this we speak, by means of this we laugh, and by this means we make the tears and sighs thou mayst have heard upon the mount. As our desires and other passions move us, our shade takes shape accordingly, and this the reason is of what thou wonderest at.
We now had reached the final circling place, and to the right hand having turned our steps, intent we were upon another care. The bank here outwardly shoots forth a flame, while upward from the ledge below a blast is breathed, which drives it back and keeps it off. Hence one by one along the open side we had to walk, while I on one hand feared the fire, and on the other falling down. My leader said to me,
Along this path a tight rein must be kept upon one's eyes, for one might very easily go wrong.
Oh, 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 God of highest clemency.
I then heard sung within the bosom of the fire, whose glowing no less made me wish to turn, and spirits moving through the flame I saw. Hence at their steps I looked, and at mine own, lending my eyes to each from time to time. After the lines with which that hymn concludes, aloud they shouted,
I know not a man.
Then in low tones began the hymn again. They cried again, this ended,
To the woods Diana kept, and thence drove Elike, for having known the taste of Venus' poison.
Then they resumed the song, and then proclaimed the names of wives and husbands who were chaste, as virtue and the marriage state enjoin. And this course, I believe, suffices them for all the period during which the fire is burning them, and such the care and diet wherewith the wound is finally sewed up.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 25. Section 60 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 26. Purgatory, the seventh ring. Lust. Instances of natural and unnatural lust.
While thus, one for the other, along the edge we went, and my good teacher often said,
Attention pay, and let my warning help thee.
The sun, which with its rays was changing now from azure all the western skies to white, was on my right side striking me, and I was with my shadow giving to the flame a brighter red. I noticed many shades give heed to this small sign as on they moved. This was what started them to speak of me, and they began to say among themselves,
That one seems not to have an unreal body.
Then some of them, as far as possible, drew near to me, though always with due care not to come out where they would not be burned.
O thou that goest on behind the rest, though not from sloth, but from respect, perhaps reply to me, who burn with thirst and fire, nor is by me alone thine answer needed, for all these here have greater thirst therefore than Indians or Ethiopians for cold water. Inform us how it is that with thyself thou makest thus a wall against the sun, as if thou hadst not entered death's snare yet.
Thus one of them addressed me, and at once had I declared myself, had I not heeded another novelty which then appeared. For through the middle of the flaming road folk with their faces turned the other way came on, and made me stop to gaze at them. There all the shades on every side I see make haste, and without stopping kiss each other, with this short form of greeting satisfied. Thus one ant from among its dark host touches its muzzle to another's, to obtain, perhaps, directions as to path or fortune. As soon as they leave off their friendly greeting, and ere the first step has been taken there, each struggles to outcry the other shade. The new-come band shouts,
Sodom and Gomorrah!
The other,
And the cow Pasiphae reclines, that to her lust the bull may run.
Thereat like cranes. If some of them should fly toward the Riphean heights, and toward the sands the rest, these shunning ice, and those the sun, one band departs, the other comes along, and weeping to their previous song they turn, and to the cry which best befitteth them. Then those same shades who had entreated me drew near to me, as they had done before, with eagerness to listen in their looks. And I, who twice had seen what they desired, began, O souls, who now are sure of having, whenever it may be, a state of peace, my body's members have not stayed beyond, either unripe or ripe, but with their blood and with their joints are really with me here. I hence go up to be no longer blind. On high a lady wins us grace, whereby I carry through your world my mortal part. But so may your best wish be soon fulfilled, in order that that heaven may shelter you which full of love is amplest in its spread. Tell me, that I may rule more paper for it, both who ye are, and what is yonder crowd which onward goes its way behind your backs. A mountaineer becomes not otherwise confused, nor looking round grows dumb, when rough and wild he enters first a town, than each shade did in its appearance there. But when set free from that astonishment, which soon diminishes in high-born hearts, the one who questioned me before resumed,
Happy art thou that shippest thus experience of these our bounds, that better thou mayst live. The people who come not along with us, in that offended, for which Caesar once, when triumphing, heard Queen cried out against him. From us they therefore separate with cries of Sodom, and by self-reproach assist, as thou hast heard, the burning by their shame. Our sin was intersexual; but since we, by following our appetites like beasts, fail to conform ourselves to human law, to our confusion, when we leave the others, her name we cry, who bestialised herself, by lying in the beast-resembling frame. Thou knowest now our deeds, and what our guilt. If who we are thou'dst know, perhaps by name, there is no time to tell, nor could I do it. As to myself, I'll rid thee of thy wish. I'm Guido Gwinetzelli, and purge me now, because of grieving well before the end.
As in Lycurgus' anguish those two sons became, when they again beheld their mother, even such did I, though I went not so far, when him I heard self-named, who father was to me and others, better men than I, who e'er made sweet and graceful rhymes of love. Hence, lost in thought, nor hearing aught or speaking, I moved, and long I gazed at him in wonder. But for the fire no nearer drew to him. When I, with looking, had been fully fed, I put myself entirely at his service with those assurances which win belief. And he,
Thou leav'st in me a memory from what I hear, so great and plain, that Lethe can neither wipe it out nor make it dim. But, if thy words swore what was true just now, tell me, why hast thou by thy speech and looks revealed to me that thou dost hold me dear?
and I to him, 'twas those sweet rhymes of yours, which, while the modern form of speech endures, will e'er endear to me their very ink.
Brother,
he said,
he whom I indicate,
he pointed at a spirit on a head,
was of his mother tongue a better smith. In love songs and in stories of romance he vanquished all. Hence let those fools talk on, who think the Limousin excelleth him. To rumour, rather than to truth, they turn their faces, forming their opinions thus, ere art or reason have by them been heeded. Thus with Gritoni many ancients did, giving, from cry to cry, to him alone the prize, until with most the truth prevailed. If now so amply privileged thou art, that lawful is thy going to the cloister, where Christ is abbot of the brotherhood, a paternoster say to him for me, or all of it that we in this world need, wherein no longer it is ours to sin.
and then perhaps to yield his place to one near by him there, he vanished through the fire, as to the bottom would a fish through water. Toward him who had been pointed out I moved a little way, and said that my desire was for his name a gracious place preparing.
Your courteous question,
he unurged began,
delighteth me so much that I cannot, nor do I wish to, hide myself from you. Arnaut am I, who going weep and sing, with sorrow my past folly I behold. and see with joy the hoped-for coming day. Now, by the power which guides you to the top of this short flight of stairs, I beg you, be mindful in due time of this my pain.
Then in the fire refining them he hid.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 26. Section 61 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 27. Purgatory, the seventh ring. Lust, the angel of purity. Dante's third dream. Virgil's last words.
As when he sends his earliest quivering beams where his Creator shed his blood, while Ebro 'neath lofty Libra falls, and Ganges' waves are being scalded by the heat of noon, so stood the sun. Daylight was, hence, departing, when God's glad messenger appeared to us. Outside the flames, upon the bank he stood, and in a voice far clearer than his ours was singing,
No further may ye go, ye holy souls, until the fire have burned you. Enter it, and be not deaf unto the song beyond.
He told us next, when we were near to him. Hence I, on hearing him, became like one who in the grave is laid. Clasping my hands together, over them I bowed, and watched the fire, while vivid images I formed of human bodies I had once seen burned. Toward me my kindly escorts turned around, and Virgil said to me,
There may, my son, be pain here, but not death. Recall to mind, recall to mind. If even on Gerion's back I safely led thee, what shall I do now that nearer God I am? Assuredly believe that, if within the centre of this flame thou shouldst for even 1,000 years remain, it could not make thee lose a single hair. And if, perchance, thou think that I deceive thee, draw near to it, and make thyself believe with thine own hands upon thy garment's hem. Lay now aside all fear. Turn round toward me, and come ahead, assured.
And yet, though 'gainst my conscience, I moved not. On seeing me still motionless and firm, somewhat disturbed, he said,
Now see, my son, this wall remains 'tween Beatrice and thee.
As Pyramus, when dying, at the name of Thisbe oped his eyes and looked at her, what time the mulberry became vermilion. Even so, my stubbornness becoming weak, I turned to my wiser leader when I heard the name that ever wells up in my heart. Thereat he shook his head and said,
What's this? Do we on this side wish to stay?
Then smiled, as one does at a child an apple wins. Then entering the fire in front of me, Statius he begged to come behind, who erst had over a long road divided us. When once inside, I would have thrown myself, that I might cool me, into boiling glass, so without measure was the burning there. My tender father, to encourage me, talked, as we moved, of Beatrice alone, and said,
I seem to see her eyes already.
A voice that sang upon the further side was guiding us, and we, on it alone intent, came forth to where the ascent began.
Ye blessed of my father, come,
was said within a light there, such that I thereby was overcome, and could not look at it.
the sun is setting, and the evening comes.
It added,
Tarry not, but hasten on, while yet the western sky has not grown dark.
Straight upward went the pathway through the rock in such direction that in front of me I cut the low sun's rays. Not many stairs had we yet tried, when I and my wise leaders were, by my shadow's vanishing, aware that back of us the sun had gone to rest. And ere in all of its unmeasured range the horizon had assumed one single tone, and night had everywhere diffused itself, each of a step had made himself a bed. Because the nature of the mount deprived us rather of power to climb than of desire. Like goats, which, swift of foot and wanton once when on the mountain heights, ere being fed, grow tamely quiet when they ruminate, all silent in the shade, while yet the sun is hot, and guarded by a herd who leans upon his staff, and serves them as he leans. And like the shepherd in the open living, who calmly spends the night beside his flock, and keepeth watch lest some wild animal should scatter it, even such all three of us were then, I like a goat, and they like shepherds, by the high rock hemmed in on either side. But little of the outer world could there be seen, but through that little I perceived the stars more bright and larger than their wont. While I was ruminating thus, and thus was gazing at them, sleep o'ertook me, sleep which oft receiveth news of future things before they are, at that same hour, methinks, when Cytherea, who it seems e'er burns with fires of love, beamed first upon the mount from out the east, dreaming I seemed to see a lady, young and fair, who, gathering flowers, was walking through a field, and as she sang, said,
Know who asks my name that I am Leah, and that I move my lovely hands about to make myself a wreath, to please myself when at my mirror I adorn me here. But never doth my sister Rachel leave her looking-glass, but sits there all day long. Her pleasure is to see her lovely eyes, as mine is to adorn me with my hands. Seeing contenteth her, and doing me.
And now before the splendid beams of dawn, which rise with greater thanks from travellers, as coming home they lodge less far away, the shades of night were fleeing everywhere, and with them sleep. Hence I arose and saw that my great teachers had already risen.
That pleasant fruit, which on so many boughs the care of men is ever looking for, shall give thine every hunger peace to-day.
These were the very words which Virgil used when turned toward me, and never were there gifts which in their sweetness could have equalled these. Such longing upon longing overcame me to be above, that at each step thereafter I felt my pinions growing for the flight. When all the stairway had beneath us passed, and we were standing on its topmost step, on me then Virgil fixed his eyes, and said,
The temporal and the eternal fire, my son, thou now hast seen, and to a place art come where I can of myself no further see. I have brought thee here by genius and by art. Henceforth as leader thine own pleasure take. Forth art thou from both steep and narrow paths. Behold the sun there shining on thy brow. Behold the tender grass, the flowers and shrubs, which here the soil yields of itself alone. Until in happiness those lovely eyes appear, which, weeping, made me come to thee, thou mayst be seated, or among them walk. From me expect no further word or sign. Free, right, and sound is thine own will, and wrong were not to act according to its hest. Hence o'er thyself I crown and mitre thee.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 27. Section 62 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 28. Terrestrial Paradise, the Divine Forest. Matilda, the River Lethe.
Keen now to look within and round about the wood divine, whose foliage dense and green was tempering for mine eyes the new day's light, waiting no longer there I left the edge, and entered very slowly on the plain, across a soil which everywhere breathed fragrance. A pleasant breeze, unvaried in itself, smote me upon the forehead with a stroke no greater than a gently blowing wind, whereby the branches trembling readily were all of them in that direction swaying, where first the holy mount its shadow casts. Yet ne'er deflecting from their upright state so much, that on their tops the little birds should give up practising their every art. But singing with full gladness, they received the earliest breezes mong the leaves, which sang in undertone a burden to their songs, like that which gathers strength from bough to bough throughout the grove of pines on Chiassi's shore, when Aeolus has set Scirocco free. My slow steps now had carried me so far inside the ancient wood, that I no longer could see whence I had entered it. Then, lo, a stream deprived me of advancing further, which with its little waves was toward the left bending the grass which sprang upon its bank. All waters which are purest here on earth would seem to have within themselves some mixture, if they should be compared to that one there, which hideth naught, though very darkly flowing neath the perpetual shade, which ne'er allows the rays of sun or moon to shine on it. I checked my feet, and with mine eyes passed on beyond the little stream, to gaze upon the great variety of flowering trees. And there, as when aught suddenly appears that turns through wonder every thought aside, a lady all alone appeared to me, who singing went her way and picking flowers, wherewith her path on every side was painted. Prithee, fair lady, thou that in love's beams art warming thee, if outward looks I trust, which use to be a witness to the heart, let it thy pleasure be, said I to her, to draw thee forward toward this stream so far, that I may understand what thou art singing. Thou makest me recall both where and what Proserpina was at the time when her mother lost, and she the flowers of spring. As turns around a lady who while dancing her feet together keeps and on the ground, and hardly sets one foot before the other, so on the little red and yellow flowers turned she toward me, no otherwise than would a virgin lowering her modest eyes, and satisfied my prayers, for near to me she drew in such a way that her sweet tones reached me with all of their significance. As soon as she was where the grass is bathed by that fair river's wavelets, she conferred on me the gift of raising up her eyes. Nor do I think so bright a light shone forth from under Venus's eyelids, when transfixed, wholly against his custom, by her son. As smiling on the other bank she stood, her hands kept picking other bright-hued flowers, which without seed the highland there brings forth. The river kept us still 3 steps apart, but even the Hellespont, where Xerxes crossed it, a bridle still to every human pride, endured no greater hatred from Leander, because it surged 'tween Sestos and Abydos, than this from me, because it then oped not.
Newcomers are ye,
She began,
and hence, because I smile in this place, which was chosen for human nature as its nest, some doubt, perhaps, still keeps you wondering here. And yet the psalm called Delectasti gives you light, which from your minds can drive away your mist. And thou that art in front, and didst entreat me, say whether thou wouldst hear aught else, for I came ready for thine every question's need.
The water and the music of the wood, said I, impugn in me a recent faith in what I heard, which contradicted this, when she,
I'll tell thee how from its own cause proceedeth that which makes thee wonder now, and clear the mist obstructing thee, the good supreme, which only by itself is pleased, made man both good and apt to good, and gave him this place as earnest of eternal peace. Through his own fault he but a little while stayed here, through his own fault, for tears and toil exchanged he honest laughter and sweet play, in order that the trouble which below the earth's and water's exhalations cause by their own trend, which is to follow heat as best they may, should wage no war on man. This mountain rose up toward the sky thus far, and free from them it is from where it's locked. And now, since all the atmosphere revolves and circles with the sphere of primal motion, unless its whirling round be somewhere broken, such motion strikes against this eminence, which in the living air is wholly free, and makes the forest, which is dense, resound, and so much power hath the stricken plant, that with its virtue it imbues the air, which by revolving scatters it about. The other land, as able of itself, or through its climate, next conceives and bears the diverse qualities of diverse trees. If this were heard, it would not seem to be a wonder yonder, when a plant takes root without there being evidence of seed. And thou must know that all this holy plain, where thou art now, is full of every seed, and fraught with fruit, which yonder is not picked. The water thou beholdest wells not up from fountains fed by mists, condensed by cold, as doth a stream which gains and loses breath, but issues from a sure and constant fount, which by the will of God regains as much as, open on both sides, it poureth forth. On this side with a virtue it descends, which takes from men all memory of sin. On the other it restoreth that of all good deeds. On this side it is Lethe called, on the other Eunoe, and worketh not, till tasted both on this side and on that. This greater is than are all other savours, and though thy thirst might be completely sated, should I reveal no more to thee, I'll give thee a corollary as further grace. Nor do I think my words will be less dear to thee, should they extend beyond my promise. Those who in ancient times sang of the age of gold, and of its happy state, perchance dreamed on Parnassus of this very place. Here was the root of mankind innocent. Spring's flowers and every fruit are always here. The nectar this, whereof all poets speak.
Thereat I turned around, and having faced my poets, I perceived that they had heard this last interpretation with a smile. Then toward the lady beautiful I turned my face.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 28. Section 63 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 29. Terrestrial Paradise, the River Lethe, the mystic pageant of the Church.
Singing as an enamoured lady would, when once her words were ended, she went on,
Blessed are they whose sins are covered up.
and like the nymphs who used to go alone through woodland shades, desiring one to see, the other to avoid the sun, she then moved counter to the stream's course, going up along its bank, and I at even pace, matching her little steps with steps as small. Her paces were with mine not yet 100, when both the margins equally were bent in such a way that toward the east I faced. Nor had we yet as far again moved on, when round toward me the lady wholly turned, and said,
My brother, look and listen now.
And lo, so bright a lustre suddenly traversed the mighty wood in all directions, that I of lightning was compelled to think. But since this ceases as it comes, while that, the longer it endured, the brighter grew, within me I kept saying, What is this? And through the illumined air was running now a gentle melody. Hence righteous zeal made me reproach the hardihood of Eve, who, while both earth and heaven obedient were, the only woman, and but just created, could not endure to stay beneath a veil; neath which, if she had but devoutly kept, I should have tasted those unspeakable delights before, and for a longer time. While I, mid such first fruits of bliss eternal, was going all enrapt, and eager still for further joys, in front of us the air, neath the green boughs, became a blazing fire, and that sweet sound was now known as a song. O Virgin sacrosanct, if I have ever been hungry, cold, or sleepless for your sake, good reasons spur my claiming a reward. For me now Helicon must pour her streams, and with her choir Urania give me help to set in verse things difficult to think. A little further on, the lengthy space still intervening between ourselves and them, showed falsely what appeared 7 trees of gold. But when I'd drawn so near to them that now the common object which deceiveth sense, because of distance lost no attribute, the virtue which prepares discourse for reason perceived that they were candlesticks, and heard Hosanna in the voices of the song. Above, the fair array flamed far more brightly than in unclouded skies the midnight moon, when at the middle of her monthly course. Filled with astonishment, I turned around to my good Virgil, and he answered me with looks no less with wonder fraught. I then gazed back again at those exalted things, which toward us moved so slowly, that outrun they would have been by newly wedded brides. The lady chided me.
Why dost thou gaze so ardently at those bright lights alone, and dost not look at that which follows them?
I then saw people who were coming on, as if behind their leaders, clothed in white, and never was such whiteness here on earth. The water was resplendent on my left, and like a mirror, if I looked in it, reflected back my body's left to me. When I was on my bank so placed, that now only the river kept me at a distance, I checked my steps that I might better see, and I beheld the little flames advance, leaving the air behind them bright with colour, and look like strokes a painter's brush had drawn, so that, above, the air remained marked out by 7 long bands, all in the hues wherewith the sun his bow, and Delia makes her belt. These standards further to the rear extended than I could see. As far as I could judge, the outermost 10 paces were apart. There now were coming neath as fair a sky as I describe here 24 elders, 2 at a time, and crowned with fleur-de-lis, and all of them were saying,
Blessed be thou among Adam's daughters.
Ay, and blessed be throughout eternity thy beauty's charms.
After the flowers and other tender blooms in front of me upon the other bank had been set free from that elected folk, as in the sky star follows after star, so after these 4 living creatures came, each with a wreath of verdant foliage crowned. And each of them was feathered with 6 wings, their feathers full of eyes, and these were such as, were they living, Argus's eyes would be. I'll waste no more rhymes, reader, to describe their forms, for other spending so constrains me, that I in this one cannot be profuse. But read thou in Ezekiel, who depicts them, as from the sky's cold parts he saw them move, accompanied by wind, and clouds, and fire. And such, as in his pages thou wilt find them, such were they here, except that, as to wings, John is with me, and disagrees with him. The space extending between the 4 contained a triumph chariot moving on 2 wheels, which came along drawn by a griffon's neck. Both of his wings the latter stretched on high tween the mid-banner and the 3 and 3, so that by cleaving it he injured none. So high they rose that they were lost to sight. His members were of gold as far as bird he was, and white the others mixed with red. Not only Rome ne'er with so fair a car made Africanus or Augustus glad, but even the suns were poor compared with this. The suns, which, when it lost its way, was burned in answer to the suppliant earth's request, when Jupiter inscrutably was just. At its right wheel 3 ladies in a ring came dancing on, the first so red, that hardly would she be noticed if in fire she were, and such the second was, as if her flesh and very bones were made of emeralds. The third one looked like newly fallen snow, and now led by the white one they appeared, now by the red, and from the latter's song the others took their time, both slow and fast. Upon the left hand 4 in purple clothed were making glad, according to the gait of one of them with 3 eyes in her head. Behind the whole group I have here described, 2 old men I beheld, unlike in clothes, but like in mien, both dignified and grave. One showed himself a pupil of that great Hippocrates, whom for the animals she loves most dearly nature made. The other revealed the opposite intention with a sword so glittering and sharp, that though I stood on this side of the stream, it caused me fear. Then 4 I saw who were of humble mien, and back of all an aged, keen-faced man, advancing by himself, and lost in sleep. These 7 were robed in garments which resembled those of the primal company, though on their heads they wore not lily garlands, but were crowned with roses and with other crimson flowers. A distant sight of them had made one swear that all on fire they were above their brows. And when the chariot was abreast of me, thunder was heard, whereat those worthy people appeared to have advance forbidden them, and stopped there with the standards in their van.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 29. Section 64 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 30. Terrestrial Paradise. Lethe. Appearance of Beatrice. Disappearance of Virgil.
When the septentrion of the highest heaven, which never either setting knew or rising, or veil of other mist than that of guilt, and which was causing every creature there to know his duty, as the lower one makes him who turns the helm to reach a port, stopped suddenly. The people of the truth, who first had come between it and the griffin, turned around toward the car as toward their peace, and one of them, as though from heaven sent down, sang thrice aloud,
Come thou from Lebanon, my spouse.
and all the rest sang after him. As at the last trump call, each of the blessed will quickly rise from out his tomb, and sing the Hallelujah with a voice regained. Even so there rose upon the car divine, at such an elder's voice, 100 servants and message-bearers of eternal life. They all were saying,
Blessed be thou that comest.
And strewing flowers on high and all around,
O scatter forth your lilies with full hands.
I've seen ere now, when day began to dawn, the eastern skies all rosy, and the rest adorned with beauty and serenity. And then the sun rise with its face o'ershadowed in such a way that, through the tempering of mists, the human eye could long endure it. So likewise standing in a cloud of flowers, which rose from angel hands, and fell again within and out the car, a lady crowned with a wreath of olives or a pure white veil appeared before me, neath a cloak of green, clothed with the colour of a living flame. My spirit hereupon, which for so long a time had not been trembling in her presence, or felt itself broken down with awe, with no more knowledge of her by mine eyes, but through a hidden virtue issuing from her, felt the great power of the olden love. As soon as that high virtue smote my sight, which formerly had pierced me through and through, ere I had passed beyond my boyhood's years, round to the left I turned me with the trust wherewith an infant to its mother runs, whenever terrified or in distress, to say to Virgil, Less now than a dram of blood remains in me that is not trembling, I feel the tokens of the olden flame. But Virgil now had left us of himself deprived, Virgil, my dearest father Virgil, to whom for my salvation I had given me. Nor yet did all our ancient mother lost avail to keep my cheeks, though cleansed with dew, from turning dark again because of tears.
Dante, though Virgil leave, weep thou not yet. Weep thou not yet, for thou wilt need to weep by reason of another sword than this.
Even as an admiral who both on stern and prow comes to behold the men that serve on the other ships and urge them to do well, so likewise on the left side of the car, when I had turned around me at the sound of mine own name, which here must needs be mentioned, I saw the lady who had first appeared concealed beneath the angels' festival, direct her eyes toward me across the stream. Although the veil, which from her head hung down, encircled by Minerva's olive leaves, did not allow her to appear distinctly, she went on royally, still stern in mien, as one doth who, when speaking, holdeth back his warmest words.
Look at us well, for we indeed are Beatrice. How wast thou able to approach the mountain? Didst thou not know that man is happy here?
My lowered eyes fell on the limpid stream, but when I saw myself reflected there, I drew them to the grass, so great the shame that weighed my forehead down. As to her child a mother seems severe, so she to me, for bitter tastes the savour of harsh pity. Silent she kept, then suddenly the angels chanted,
Ye place it my trust.
But further than my feet they did not go, even as the snow among the living beams grown on the back of Italy is frozen, when blown and hardened by Slavonian winds, and then, when melting, trickles through itself, if but the land that loses shadows breathe, and thus seems like a fire that melts a candle. Even so was I with neither tears nor sighs before the song of those who ever tune their notes to music of eternal spheres. But when I heard in their sweet harmonies the sympathy they had for me, far more than had they said, "Why, lady, shame him so," the ice bound tightly round my heart was turned to breath and water, and through mouth and eyes issued with anguish from my inmost breast. Then she, still standing motionless upon the same side of the car, addressed those sympathetic creatures with these words:
Ye keep your watches through the eternal day, so that nor night nor slumber robs from you one step the world may take upon its course. My answer hence is made with greater care, that he who yonder weeps may understand, in guilt and sorrow of one measure be. Not only through the work of those great spheres, which to some end directly guide each seed, according as the stars are its companions, but through the bounty of the grace divine, which for its reign hath clouds so very high our eyes cannot approach them. This one here was such potentially in early life, that all right dispositions would have had wondrous results in him. But all the more malign and savage doth a soil become, when sown with evil seed and left untilled, the better and more vigorous it is. I for a while sustained him with my face, and showing him my youthful eyes, I led him along with me, turned in the right direction. But when the threshold of my second age I reached, and changed my life, he took himself away from me, and gave him to another. And when from flesh to spirit I had risen, and beauty and virtue had increased in me, less dear and pleasing was I then to him, and o'er an untrue path he turned his steps, following deceitful images of good, which not that they have promised pay in full. Nor yet did it avail me to obtain the inspirations, wherewith both in dreams and otherwise I called him back, he cared so little for them. So low down he fell, that short were now all means for his salvation, save showing him the people that are lost. I visited the gateway of the dead for this, and unto him who guided him up hither, fraught with tears, my prayers were borne. God's high, fate-ordered will would broken be, if Lethe should be passed, and should such food be tasted, without paying first the scot of penitence made manifest by tears. End of Purgatorio, Canto 30. Section 65 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 31. Terrestrial Paradise. Dante's Confession. His immersion in Lethe. Beatrice unveiled. O thou that art across the sacred stream!
Toward me directing with its point her speech, which even edgewise had seemed sharp to me. Continuing, she began without delay.
Say if this be true, to such a charge must thy confession be united now.
My strength was so confounded that my voice began to move, and wholly died away, ere by its organs it had been released. A while she bore it. Then,
What thinkest thou?
She said,
Reply, for thy sad memories are not extinguished by the water yet.
Perplexity and fear together mixed extorted such a yes from out my mouth that eyes to hear its utterance were required. Even as a crossbow breaks its cord and bow, whenever with too great attention shot, and with less force the arrow strikes its mark, so neath that heavy burden I broke down, and as I poured forth gushing tears and sighs, my voice more slowly through its passage came. Then she,
Across the paths which I desired, and which were leading thee to love the good, beyond which there is nothing one can wish, what trenches didst thou find, or hindering chains, for which thou thus must needs despoil thyself of hope of further progress on thy way? What luring charms or what advantages displayed themselves upon the brows of others, that thou shouldst pay thy passing court to them?
Thereat, when I had heaved a bitter sigh, I scarcely had the voice to make an answer, and painfully my lips gave form to it. Weeping, I said, Things of the present turned with their delusive joy my steps aside, as soon as e'er your face was hid from me.
Hadst thou been silent, or hadst thou denied,
said she,
what thou confessest, no less clear would be thy guilt, since known by such a judge. But when self-accusation of one's sin from one's own cheek breaks forth, in this our court the wheel is turned to blunt the sharpened edge. And yet, that for thy fault thou mayst be now the more ashamed, and that, when thou again shalt hear the sirens, thou mayst stronger be, desist thou now from sowing tears, and hark! So shalt thou hear o'er what a different path my buried body should have moved thy feet. Nature ne'er showed thee, nor did art, such beauty as did the pleasing members which enclosed me, and which are scattered now, dissolved in earth. Hence, if the highest pleasure failed thee thus by reason of my death, what mortal thing should afterward have drawn thee to desire it? At the first arrow of deceitful things, thou surely oughtest to have risen up to follow me, who was no longer such. Thy wings, at least, should not have been weighed down to wait for further blows from some young girl or other vain thing of as brief a use. A young bird waits for 2 blows or for 3, but for the eyes of fully feathered birds a net is spread or arrow shot in vain.
As children who are silent when ashamed, and with their eyes upon the ground keep listening, and conscience-stricken and repentant are, so I remained, and she.
Since thou art grieved because of hearing me, lift up thy beard, and thou from seeing shalt receive more grief.
With less resistance is a sturdy oak uprooted, either by our native wind, or by the wind that blows from Jabba's land, than I at her behest raised up my chin. And when by beard she asked to see my face, I well perceived the venom in her words. Thereafter, when my face was raised again, I saw that those first creatures were at rest from strewing flowers. And thereupon mine eyes, which were as yet but partially assured, saw Beatrice turned toward the animal which in 2 natures one sole person is. Though 'neath her veil, and across the stream, it seemed to me that she surpassed her old-time self, more than she did all others when on earth. So pricked me now the nettle of repentance, that of all other things what turned me most unto its love became to me most hostile. Whereat such great contrition gnawed my heart, that overcome I fell, and what I then became she knows who gave me cause for it. Then, when my heart restored my outward strength, I saw the lady I found alone, above me, saying,
"Hold on to me! Hold on to me!"
Into the stream she had already borne me up to my neck, and dragging me behind her, light as a shuttle o'er its top was moving. When I was near the blessed shore, I heard,
"Purge me with hyssop,"
said in tones so sweet that far from writing I cannot recall it. The lovely lady, stretching out her arms, embraced my head, and plunged me in the stream so far that I was forced to drink its water. Drawing me thence, she set me, when thus bathed, within the dance ring of the loved four, and each of them embraced me with her arm.
Nymphs are we here, and in the sky are stars.
Ere Beatrice came down into the world, we were ordained to be her maids.
We'll lead thee to see her eyes.
But for the joyous light, there are the 3 upon the other side, who more profoundly gaze, will sharpen thine.
Thus singing they began, and thereupon they led me with them to the griffin's breast, where, turning toward us, Beatrice remained. And,
"See to it that thou spare not thine eyes,"
they said,
"before the emeralds we have set thee, whence love of old against thee drew his shafts."
1,000 wishes, hotter far than flames, bound mine eyes fast to those resplendent eyes, which on the griffin set their steady gaze. As in a glass the sun, not otherwise the twofold animal was gleaming in them, at first in one, then in another way. Think, reader, if I wondered when I saw that it was keeping quiet in itself, while in its image it was changing form. While, glad and with amazement filled, my soul was tasting of the food which, while it sates, still causes thirst and hunger for itself, proving themselves to be of higher rank by reason of their deeds, the other 3 came dancing to their angel roundelay.
Turn thou,
Their song was,
turn thou, Beatrice, thy holy eyes upon thy faithful one.
Who hath to see thee
ta'en so many steps.
Kindly do us the favour to unveil thy mouth to him,
that he may thus perceive the second loveliness which thou dost hide.
O splendour of eternal living light, who 'neath Parnassus' shades e'er grew so pale, or from its cistern e'er so deeply drank, as not to feel bewildered in his mind, should he attempt to paint what thou didst seem, when, symbolized by heaven's own harmonies, thou didst reveal thee in the open air.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 31. Section 66 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 32. Terrestrial Paradise. Vicissitudes and transformation of the car. The harlot and the giant.
So steadfast were mine eyes, and so intent on gratifying their decennial thirst, that all my other senses were asleep, and both on this side and on that a wall of heedlessness they had. The holy smile so strongly drew them with the olden net, when forcibly my face was toward my left turned by those goddesses, for from their lips I now was hearing a
"Too steadfastly."
Thereat the state of vision which exists in eyes but newly smitten by the sun caused me to be a while deprived of sight. But when my eyes were to the small accustomed, I say the small with reference to the great resplendence whence perforce I turned away, I saw that on the right the glorious host had wheeled, and was returning with the sun and with the sevenfold flame in front of it. As to protect itself a troop revolves beneath its shields and wheeleth with its flag, before the whole of it can change direction, even so the heavenly kingdom's soldiery who forward were had wholly passed us by, before its pole had made the chariot turn. Back to the wheel the ladies then returned, and so the Griffin drew his blessed burden, that though he moved, no feather of him shook. The lady fair, who through the ford had drawn me, Statius and I, were following the wheel which made its orbit with the smaller arc. As thus we crossed the lofty wood, unpeopled because of her who trusted to the serpent, a song angelic kept our steps in time. A liberated arrow in 3 flights, perhaps as great a distance would have gone, as we had moved, when Beatrice alighted.
Adam!
I then heard murmured by them all. They circled then around a tree, despoiled of flowers and other leaves on every branch. Its crowning boughs, spread out in greater width the higher up they are, would for their height be wondered at by Indians in their woods.
Thou, Griffin, happy art, since with thy beak thou tearest not this pleasant tasting wood, because one's belly rises in pain therewith.
Thus round the sturdy tree the others cried, whereat the double-natured animal,
Thus is the seed of all just deeds preserved.
Then turning toward the pole which he had drawn, he dragged it forward to the widowed tree, and 'neath it left that part of it tied up. As our plants swell when falls the great light, mixed with that which shines behind the heavenly carp, and as each thereupon renews itself in its own colour, ere the sun yokes up his racing horses 'neath another star. Even so, a hue revealing, not as bright as that which roses have, and more than that of violets, that tree renewed itself, whose branches once had been so bare of leaves. I understood not, 'tis not sung on earth, the hymn which thereupon that people sang, nor did I bear to hear the whole song through. If I could picture how the unpitying eyes, on hearing Syrinx's story, sleepy grew, the eyes to which much waking cost so dear, as doth an artist who from models paints, would I describe how I then fell asleep. But let whoever will feign sleeping well. Hence to the point I pass when I awoke, and say a splendour rent my slumber's veil, and then a call,
Arise! What doest thou?
As Peter, John, and James were led to see some of the early blossoms of the apple, which makes the angels eager for its fruit, and causes endless marriage feasts in heaven, and overcome recovered at the word whereby far greater slumbers had been broken. And even as they perceived their company diminished both by Moses and Elias, and all the raiment of their master changed, so I, recovering, near me standing saw that pitying lady who before had been the leader of my steps along the stream. But where is Beatrice? All lost in doubt I said. when she...
Behold her sitting there, beneath the tree's new leaves, upon its roots. Behold the company surrounding her. The rest on high behind the griffin go, with songs of sweeter sound and deeper theme.
I know not if at greater length her words were poured, because now in mine eyes was she, who hindered my attending to aught else. On the bare ground she sat, and all alone, left there to be the guardian of the car, I saw the biformed animal tie up. Circling, the 7 nymphs with their persons formed a hedge for her, those lights held in their hands, which safe from Auster are, and Aquilo.
Here for a while shalt thou a woodman be, then without end with me a citizen of that Rome whereof Christ a Roman is. Hence, for the world's sake, which lives badly, keep thine eyes upon the car, and what thou seest be sure to write when once on earth again.
Thus Beatrice, and I, who now was wholly devoted at the feet of her commands, whither she wished turned both my mind and eyes. Fire ne'er descended with so swift a motion out of dense clouds, when from the highest region the rain is falling, as I now beheld the bird of Jove swoop down upon the tree, and break not only its new budding leaves and blossoms, but its bark. With all his might he smote the chariot next, whereat it reeled, as in a storm a ship, when by the waves to starboard now, and now to larboard driven. And then a she-fox, which from all good food seemed fasting, I perceived, hurling herself against the bottom of the triumph car. But for her ugly sins upbraiding her, my lady put her to such speedy flight as was permitted by her fleshless bones. Thereafter, whence it first had come, I saw the eagle down into the chariot's ark descend, and leave it feathered with his plumes. And such a voice as from a suffering heart comes forth was that which came from heaven, and said,
My little ship, how badly thou art laden!
Between both wheels the earth seemed opened then, and forth from it I saw a dragon come, who upward through the chariot thrust his tail, and like a wasp which draweth back its sting, withdrawing his bad tail, he drew away part of its floor, and keen for more went off. That which remained reclothed itself again, as rich soil doth with grasses, with the plumes, offered perhaps with wise and kind intent. Then one wheel and the other and the pole were covered up so quickly that a mouth is open kept much longer by a sigh. When thus the holy structure was transformed, it put forth heads upon its members, 3 upon its pole, and at each corner 1. The first were horned like oxen, but the 4 had on their foreheads but a single horn. Been seen, sitting thereon, as boldly as a fort is seated on a lofty mountain top, a shameless prostitute appeared before me, with eyebrows that were quick to wander round, and then, to see that none should take her from him, I saw a giant standing at her side. At times they kissed each other. From her head unto her soles. Then, filled with jealousy, and cruel in his wrath, loosing the monster, he dragged it through the wood so far away, that with this last alone he shielded me against the harlot and unnatural beast.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 32. Section 67 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Purgatorio, Canto 33. Terrestrial Paradise. Beatrice's Prophecy. Dante's final purification in the river Eunoe.
Oh God! The heathen folk are come.
Now 3, now 4 alternately, and shedding tears, the ladies a sweet psalmody began. And Beatrice with sighs of sympathy was listening to their words with such a look, that Mary at the cross changed little more. But when the other maids had given way that she might speak, she rose upon her feet, and coloured with the hue of fire, replied,
A little while, and ye shall not behold me, and then again, beloved sisters mine, a little while, and me ye shall behold.
All 7 she thereupon before her placed, and merely by a nod behind her moved me and the lady, and the sage who stayed. She thus was going on, nor do I think her 10th step had been set upon the ground, when with her eyes she forcibly met mine. Then with a tranquil face she said to me,
More quickly come, that, if I speak to thee, for listening to me thou mayst be well placed.
As soon as I was with her as I ought, she said to me,
Why, brother, dost not venture to question me, now that thou comest with me?
As unto those who show excessive reverence when speaking in the presence of their elders, and therefore draw no clear voice to their teeth, to me it happened that with imperfect tones, Madonna, I began, my welfare's needs you know, and that which may be good for it. And she to me,
From fear and bashfulness I wish thee now to extricate thyself, that thou mayst speak no more like one who dreams. Know that the vessel which the serpent broke was and is not. But let whose fault it is, believe God's vengeance fears not human sops. Nor shall the eagle airless for all time remain, who left his feathers on the car, whence monstrous it became and then a prey. For I see well, and therefore tell it, stars now near, and from all checks and obstacles secure, which for us shall a time obtain within which a 510 and 5, sent forth by God, shall kill the female thief, and that great giant, who with her is guilty. And my prediction, which is dark, perhaps, as Themis and the Sphinx, persuades thee less, because, as theirs did, it beclouds thy mind. But facts will soon become the Naiades, which shall this difficult enigma solve, without the loss of either sheep or grain. Give heed, and even as uttered by myself, see that thou teach these words of mine to those that live the life which is a race toward death, and bear in mind, when thou art writing them, not to conceal in what state thou hast seen the tree, which twice now hath been here despoiled. Whoever robs or teareth that apart, with blasphemy of deed offendeth God, who for his own use only made it holy. For biting it, in pain and in desire, the first soul longed for him 5,000 years and more, who punished in himself the bite. Thy mind is sleeping, if it deemeth not that for a special cause it soars so high, and at its summit so inverted is. And if the vain thoughts which surround thy mind had not been Elsa water, and their pleasure as to the mulberry a Pyramus, thou, by so many circumstances only, wouldst in the interdict upon the tree see morally God's justice. But, since made of stone I see thee in thine understanding, and being petrified, so dark in mind that thou art blinded by my speech's light, I also, if not written, wish that painted, at least, thou bear it in thee, for the reason the pilgrim's staff is carried wreathed in palm.
and I, as sealing wax, which changes not the shape imprinted on it by the seal, so likewise is my brain now stamped by you. But why so far above my mental sight are your desired words now flying up? It loses them the more it strives.
That thou,
She said,
mayst thus appraise the school which thou hast followed, and perceive how able its teaching is to carry out my word, and also see that your ways are removed as far from the divine as ere the heaven which speeds most high is distant from the earth.
Whence her I answered, I do not recall that I have e'er estranged myself from you, nor am I conscious of remorse therefore.
And if thou canst not call it to thy mind,
She answered with a smile,
remember now that this same day thou hast of Lethe drunk, and if from smoke a fire may be inferred, this thy forgetfulness but clearly proves a fault in thy desire intent elsewhere. Truly my words shall naked be henceforth, as much at least as it shall needful seem to make them clear to thine untutored sight.
Both more refulgent and with slower steps, the sun was holding now the noonday circle, which with each point of view moves here and there, when even as he who as a leader goes ahead of people stops, if something new he find upon his path, the ladies 7 stopped at a death-pale shadow's edge, like that which neath green leaves and darkling boughs the Alps cast o'er their icy mountain streams. In front of them I seemed to see Euphrates and Tigris from one fountain issue forth, and from each other slowly part as friends. O light and glory of the human race, what stream is this, which from one source unfolds, and then from its own self itself withdraws? In answer to this question I was told,
Pray that Matilda tell thee.
Whereupon, like one who frees himself from blame, replied the lovely lady,
This with other things hath he been told by me, and I am sure that Lethe's water hath not hid it from him.
And Beatrice,
Perhaps a greater care, which oft deprives one's memory of its power, hath made the vision of his mind's eye dark, But Unue behold, which yonder now is flowing forth, conduct him to its bank, and, as thou art wont, revive his lifeless power.
Even as a noble soul makes no excuse, but to another's will its own conforms, as soon as e'er by outward signs disclosed. Even so, when she had taken hold of me, the lovely lady moved, and then to Statius said with a lady's manner,
Come with him.
If, reader, I had now more space for writing, I'd sing, at least in part, of that sweet drink, which never would have satisfied my thirst. But inasmuch as filled are all the pages planned warp-like for this second canticle, no further doth art's bridle let me go. From that most holy water I returned made young again, as new trees are in spring, when with new foliage they renew themselves, pure, and disposed to rise up to the stars.
End of Purgatorio, Canto 33.
Okay, so that was Purgatorio 33. That was the last one. Now there's Paradiso and a different project will be the next set. And there's 33 chapters in that at about 7.5 minutes each. Again, so it'll be 6 or 7 more streams before this book's done. I'm probably going to power through them this week because I want a different book. I'd rather H.P. Lovecraft or something like Shakespeare. I just kind of didn't realize how long this one was. But she turned out well, hey? Well, let's see. Let's go back to the other one. There we go. Turned out all right. Like, come on. That was pretty freehand. Everything was freehand, so. And it's all done in one piece, except the dress was added after. But, she turned out all right. Kind of like a creepy Raggedy Ann doll or something. Or Raggedy Andy. But it'll work. Okay. Gonna go down. Bye.